Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week. Wait, are we even on air?
We are on air, Stevie.
Oh, hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast. My phone's a little bit slow, so I didn't know if we were live or not. I am coming at you from the great haunted city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am at a conference that is unbook related, and I'm here with my co-host Andy Peliquin, and we were just talking some book shoes, and we are just still waiting on our guest author Garrett. What is his last name, Andy?
Robinson. We had him
Garrett.
on a special episode that we do for the Indie Fantasy Addicts, the monthly theme. He was awesome, fun to hang out with. So he's coming back on. Might be having some technical difficulties, but
Okay.
he'll be here soon.
And today we are talking about, what is it? Sans politics. What was it again?
Representation without being political.
Representation. Okay. Yeah, I'm excited to get into that one, so you can explain what the hell that is to me. Not because of me, just because our fans need to know. But
Absolutely.
I know what it is. I know exactly what that is. I know that sans is French for without. So
Very
that's all
good, Stevie.
that's all I need to know. So we should go ahead and start with like the cool thing of the week, man, and a little bit
Yeah,
of
for
news about
sure.
what's going on.
Yeah, why don't you go
Um,
ahead?
okay, so for me, what is so the cool thing of the week for me would be that I went to Hershey Park yesterday. Made a candy bar for the Jigsaw Blade, called it Jigsaw Blade Crunch. I think we rode like 6 roller coasters, and there's one that shoots you up to 75 miles per hour. And what's interesting about this one is I'm usually not scared of roller coasters, but this one doesn't have a bar that goes over your shoulders.
Oh, God.
So yes, it doesn't go over your shoulders. So it's just this, and the one that goes over your lap is very small, so it doesn't cover the left or right of your leg. And no matter how tight you put it on, you're supposed to come up off your chair. It's like part of the design.
That's
So
scary.
yeah, so when you go straight up, and then when you come down, it's inward. So instead of this, you're actually coming inside like a snake. So you're snaking inside. So you're going even more than just perfectly vertically down. You're just, it was creepy. But the thing is, you come up off your chair and you lean forward, and I just hated it. I hated it so much. We did it twice. So, so that was pretty cool. And then the chocolate bar thing I thought was interesting.
What
I'm
was in it?
getting so I did. I'm not a big chocolate guy.
Hmm.
So whenever I eat chocolate, I want like something other than chocolate in it to make me full. Because when I eat to get full. I don't eat to like enjoy a good candy bar. So I had pretzels, Rice Krispie Crunch stuff in it, and then I also am a big fan of toffee. So I had some like Heath Crunch stuff in there,
Nice.
and also white chocolate. So
Interesting.
yeah, I am officially sick of chocolate. I've been to Hershey Land. I've been to Hershey, Philadelphia for 3 days now, and I think I've had. So I before I came to Hershey, which is actually not called Hershey. There's a different name for the town. Um, I hadn't had a candy bar in probably 2 or 3 years, like a full candy bar, two or
Yeah.
three years, and I'm not joking. I'm not a big chocolate guy. I think I've eaten more chocolate than I've ever had in my entire life, and now I
Wow.
have diabetes. So no, dude, like seriously, when we're talking chocolate, everybody here eats chocolate. Like it's the hotel we stayed in. Every time we went to go ask a question at concierge, you weren't leaving without a full size chocolate bar.
Oh, wow.
So like all the girls watching this, I think Lisa's watching this too. Like it's a paradise. So I got so sick of milk chocolate that I had to start getting the special dark. Um, yeah. Anyway, just I'm chocolated out, man. Another cool thing is that I am finishing up the Forsaken Blade. I have like 65,000 words left to edit, which I have to do in 4 or 5 days. Which, damn, editing sucks balls, man. Hey, Garrett's with us.
Just at the right
Yeah,
time,
right at
too.
the ball talk. What's up, Garrett? I don't know if
He's
he can hear us.
he's just getting everything set up.
Yeah, he's got the gaming chair, though. I bet we're already going to get along. Mm. So, Andy, what is something cool that happened to you?
Well, I know this is something that you're really going to appreciate, Stevie.
Whoa,
We can hear him. That's good.
that was quick. Is that really him typing, or is that him just messing with it?
No, he types fast, man. That's nuts.
Jesus Lord. I mean,
Yeah.
damn. Thought I was fast.
He's probably a gamer. So this is something that I know you're really gonna like, Stevie. I started watching anime last week.
Oh, sausage sama.
I started with One Punch Man because everyone
Dude,
says I have to watch One Punch Man.
good choice. Good choice.
And so like I can't watch it while I'm cooking or anything. So I had,
Yeah.
because it's in Japanese with English subtitles, so I have
Yeah,
to
always
watch it.
watch it in Japanese.
So then I started watching Castlevania. Actually, I watched both seasons of Castlevania because it's in English.
So good. So good.
And yeah, I thought it was quite excellent. So I might be continuing this anime kick for a little while. I know I've got a few more. I've got Hellsing that someone told me I have to watch because it's like grim darker than grim dark.
It's very dark. It's perfect for you.
I've got the Dragon Prince, which a lot of people told me is it's sort of like it's like the modern telling, or it's like a modern story of set in the Avatar world.
Oh, cool.
It's a Netflix one, I think, and some people were like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." So I'm kind of starting with anime light, and when it comes time for me to get into more stuff, I'll be pestering you. But
dude, yeah, my main one that I would suggest to you now is Hunter x Hunter, and I think everyone who watches this show has watched Hunter x Hunter, and I think we can all agree it's like one of the best. Wait, Garrett Robinson, does he have a YouTube channel of his own?
Yeah, he does.
Oh, I used to watch his stuff before I became an author. I think he has a lot of awards, doesn't he?
Yes, I believe so.
That's right. I think he yeah, he actually helped me a lot whenever I was studying all this stuff. But yeah, dude. So, did you get into anime because we were talking about how big of an influence it was to my writing?
No, I was at this convention, or the writers' retreat, and people were going on and on about anime. So I was like, "All right, pitch me anime. Explain to me why I should watch it."
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about like the storytelling and the sort of the visual aspects of it, and I did find it interesting. I do like the difference in the storytelling structure that they use, which is vastly different from modern American TV. So, and then of course, growing up in Japan, there is something kind of funny about seeing a lot of these things. Like when you see Saitama walking in his flip flops, and he's carrying little grocery bags from the 7-Eleven. It's just like it brings back the memories of growing up in Japan. So it was kind of
like nostalgic.
A little bit.
That's cool.
And of course, the graphics of it all is really fun. You can get away with doing a lot of stuff in anime and of course cartoons that you could never get away with in live action movies. So it does make for much more visually interesting TV in a way.
It's what, I do have nostalgia when it comes to watching anime, but of course not for the same reason. But in Texas, you would definitely be made fun of if you watched anime. So as a kid, I remember sneaking watching anime, and back then we didn't have Netflix or Hulu or YouTube, so I would go buy these DVDs. And when I remember going to a speech competition, I had the DVD hidden in a James Bond this thing, and I would just stay in the corner watching it remember portable DVD players at all?
Yep, absolutely.
With the tiny screens.
Yeah,
I would sit there and watch that. But now anime is much more accepted, even by people in South Texas. So,
yeah. And I figure, I'm going to be attending more conventions over the next few years, and people, they seem to enjoy it. So I might as well know a little bit about it.
Yeah, I need to, dude, you make me, I need to go to more conventions. I really do. I think it really helps get your name out there, and I need to get some business cards made. Didn't you get some made?
Yeah, I did. They're pretty
sweet. Can we see them?
Sure. Let me see. I've got them in my wallet. I know that much. Here we go.
Well,
all right.
Let me see that.
Here we go. All right, presenting screen. Boom. There we go.
Oh, it's the same typography as the Hunter books.
Yeah. Simple, clear, hopefully.
What about the other side?
It's blank, so I can write stuff on it.
Oh, that's a great idea. See, did you see the image I put up on Colliers Conquerors?
My
DBZ cover?
Yes, I did.
Do you like that?
I'm not a Dragon Ball fan yet, so me it wasn't.
God. Dude, you got to go watch it. See, I think people who like reading my stuff will like the cover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the pale girl is Lisa.
Yeah, I
So,
figured as much. Garrett, can you hear us?
Now I can hear you. Can you hear me?
golly.
We can hear you.
And can you hear me with not terrible audio quality?
It's a little echoey, but we've had worse.
Okay, great.
Is that a Blue Yeti?
Is that what you're hearing?
No,
I actually
Okay.
don't hear that.
Huh.
it's all right.
Garrett, I was just telling Andy that before I became an author, I watched a lot of your videos. So thank you.
Oh, no kidding. That's fantastic. I'm
Hey,
really
there
glad
it
to hear
is.
that.
Yes.
Okay,
thank
so
you
that
very
should
much
be
for
what
all
you
those,
should be
yeah.
hearing right
Yeah.
there, right? Yes.
That's great.
So
Oh.
if you're listening to this podcast, go and check out Garrett's stuff on YouTube. He's got high quality videos, and especially if you're wanting to become an author or just curious about it, go check out Garrett's stuff. And Garrett, what is your YouTube channel called?
It's just my name, so it's Garrett Robinson, spelled
Okay.
nothing special.
Do you still do videos?
I do still do videos. I actually have taken a hiatus on my Writer Wednesday videos just because I did a schedule evaluation in February, and I was spending about 15 hours a week. No, that's not right. About 10 or 12 hours a week on videos. So I cut it down to one weekly video on Friday, which sometimes is about writing, sometimes is about, the latest Star Wars or Marvel movie, just kind of whatever I feel like talking about.
Speaking
Yeah.
of which, Spider-Man: Far From Home, thoughts and opinions, Garrett?
Loved it so much. I was such a big fan. I felt like it was the perfect follow-up to Endgame because Endgame was great and wonderful, but also sort of not a downer exactly, but it was too serious. And I feel not too serious for itself, but if the whole MCU became like Endgame, it wouldn't be fun anymore. And I feel like Far From Home was like, okay, that's all done with. Now let's go back to fun superhero stories.
Yeah,
let's go
I
back to
agree.
having a blast with these guys.
Yeah, I will say I didn't walk away from it as thrilled as I was with Homecoming. Like when I walked away from Homecoming, it was like, so this is exactly the Spider-Man that I didn't know I wanted to see,
Totally. And with
then,
a fantastic villain. I mean, the Vulture, clearly a better villain than Mysterio. Mysterio was great, but
you know what I was hoping for? I was hoping that they would flip the script with Mysterio and actually make him a hero.
Oh, really?
It would have been so interesting because everybody knows he's a villain.
Yeah.
So, fuck with us that way. And of course, when he becomes the villain, I hope it's not spoiling the movie for anybody, but when it turns out that he's the villain, I was like, okay, this is a really interesting take on the character that you never really know much about him in the Spider-Man comics. There's a little bit about him. So when they introduced him like that and the way that they tied it into the other, to the other movies, I loved that.
Totally.
But I was a little disappointed because I was hoping that they would, use Jake Gyllenhaal as a hero.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, he can always come back. He can always, it's Marvel, and Mysterio in particular has died in the comics so many times, and it's always turned out to be an illusion. But for me, and I know that this shouldn't be the case, but the entire movie was made one of my favorites ever by the first post-credit scene. First, I mean, I lost.
Yeah.
I lost I lost it in the theater. Just very loudly in the middle of the darkened theater, cried out, "Are you effing kidding me?" And some people looked over at me very shocked that I would use such language.
And it was amazing that they did that.
Yes.
That they took that massive step really at the end of movie 2.
And brought back just the best casting job in Marvel history. I mean, come on. No spoilers.
For me though, I loved it. Like I'm actually kind of weak when it comes to stuff that I love. So if it's a Star Wars movie, I don't care how crappy it is. I'm gonna love it just because I love being in the universe, and that extends over to Spider-Man because he is by far my favorite. With Star-Lord and Iron Man really close behind him. The only thing with the movie is I would have to agree with both of you that I thought the Vulture was by far a better villain, just because I felt like there was more. I don't know. Mysterio I didn't think it was a very strong villain because all Spider-Man had to do was go I don't want to give anything away, but
to go destroy him.
But that last video, I was like, wow, Mysterio was the greatest villain.
Right.
For that reason.
Totally.
For that reason. He was the worst villain. And there was a guy next to me. He was watching it by himself. See, I was with Lisa, my brother, and Valerie, his girlfriend. I turned to him, and both of us were shocked. And I turned to him and I said, do you need a hug? Because I need a hug. So it's so cool. The Marvel fan base is so kind, and they just take it so seriously because these are the movies that we grew up with,
Right.
or at least I did. And I just love the fan base so much and how passionate. And it's like the disbelief that we what's it called, Andy? The disbelief that we put away. What's it called?
Suspended disbelief.
Suspension of disbelief.
The suspension of disbelief. I feel like it extends even after the movies. You know,
Totally.
like for me, these things actually still are very much real,
Right.
even when I leave the movies. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a give-take relationship between the creators and the audience. I feel like the movie has to do enough work to make you want to suspend your disbelief, and then it's the audience's job to actually suspend the disbelief enough to enjoy the story. Because if you sit down and analyze any movie enough, none of them make sense. But that's not the point. The point is to give you a story that will entertain you, make you feel something, make you feel awesome, whatever it is. And so if a property wants me to suspend my disbelief, and this is just like a me personal thing, but if it wants me to suspend my disbelief in order to make me afraid, angry, sad, or just to be like, to feel more cynical about the world, I'm not gonna meet that movie halfway. But for, like you said, Marvel and Spider-Man in particular, they want me to have a good time. They want me to enjoy the heck out of myself. They want me to go out and have a great experience with my family. And I'm more than willing to meet them halfway on that. And so it does last. And I'm so excited always to see the next Marvel movie, because like even the worst Marvel movie is kind of, I mean, okay, it's fine. It's good.
Thor 2 was not the worst movie in the world.
Right, exactly. There are so many worse movies out there.
it's funny
And
that
I
you
love
say
that
Thor 2, because that was the least memorable Marvel movie I've seen.
Exactly.
But I loved Ragnarok, though. That was probably my favorite out of all the Thors.
Oh, I'm so excited that they got Taika Waititi back for the next one.
Right?
Oh my god!
Basically, the whole future lineup of the movies and the TV shows that they released at Comic-Con, I am super excited about that.
Even the Natalie Portman one.
Oh, I'm so stoked. Did you read Female Thor in the comics?
I did. I loved that when they made Thor a woman.
Yeah.
A lot of people were like, Thor's a guy, obviously, and obviously he is. But it played with the trope of the worthiness, and it turned things on its head in a way that I found really enjoyable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
What do y'all think about Valkyrie?
Oh, I think it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, she's God, what was her announcement?
Is she gonna make her lesbian or not? They're not.
Well, she's canonically bisexual in the comics. So I think that's what they were going for. There was I don't know if you heard about this, but there was a scene that Waititi actually like fought for really hard in Thor Ragnarok that was going to have her with her love interest in just sort of like a flashback scene. It was going to be a small thing, but any queer content doesn't cut it in China. Absolutely does not cut it in China.
Really?
Yeah, so Marvel, anytime that they have alluded to something like that one sentence in Endgame about the guy going on a date with another guy, that was cut from Endgame because in China.
Wait, what was that?
There was that support group that Cap was running where he was everybody was talking about like after the snap, and that one guy told a story about like finally getting back into the dating scene, and he was dating another guy. Now that's hardly the be-all end-all of queer representation, but even that tiny bit had to be cut from the China release because you can't do that in China, and that's such a huge film market.
I had this really interesting thought. I just watched Captain Marvel for the second time on the plane ride home from this retreat last week, and throughout the movie they call her Ace. And the whole movie, she never shows interest in either direction, and so it was like, what if that's what they're doing with her? They're showing that.
Now that's a think piece.
Sexual orientation. I hope that's the case. Like, sleep deprived brain comes up with this, but it was just like, if they were setting this up, and in the second movie they continued down this path of her as a character without giving her a love interest that's very visibly I'm attracted to you because of a certain thing, but just they kind of make her this character. It would be a harder sell because romance is at the core of every single bestseller anything,
right?
But if they went that route, especially quietly,
I can see
would love
that.
it.
I feel like they're going to take other small steps because Ace is a thing that so many people don't. Everybody knows what a lesbian is. Virtually everyone knows what bisexual is. Ace is something that a lot less people have heard of or begun to engage with or understand in any way.
But
So,
like if
I
they
love the idea.
if they could depict it
Yeah.
properly
Right.
on the big screen, again, as today's topic says, without going political about it, but just make it sort of like something that's there,
Yeah.
not a big deal, not in your face, but it's like, this isn't a thing for me. I don't need this to feel complete as a person. I don't need this, romantic interest. It's not who I am. And she's a badass everywhere else. She can be a great mother figure to the young Rambo girl.
Yeah.
She can be a friend. She can be all kinds of stuff. But then sort of removing the sexuality in so much as asexual people have it, I think it would be a really interesting step that would be very inclusive, that would represent this sort of underknown subsection. I watched BoJack Horseman, and they did that in there. And every time that they did it, obviously it's the idiot character who's never takes anything seriously. But the way that they represented it in BoJack Horseman, I thought it was like, well, now I know more about this thing that I didn't understand at all before. Didn't bother me at all. Right. And it's not like it's like I would say it would almost be more natural to many people than something like bisexuality or polyamory, because it's just something like sex isn't a thing for me.
It's not my thing. Yeah.
So I feel like that would be almost an easier step to take.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I could see that. And there's even, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but like I'm active in fandom spaces, and there's a lot of fan fiction and discussion and headcanons and whatnot about Carol and the other female lead in the movie being in a relationship. And you could still have their dynamic be exactly the same as it was in the first one, and just not have it ever progress past a certain point. And that would be, I mean, that's, that would sort of in a way be taking a page from like Good Omens, for example, where it's like these two leads are clearly in some kind of relationship, but they're not humans. They probably don't even have, bits, for lack of a better word. There's not that more like primal the physical component of it, but they're clearly two people who care about each other so deeply, and it's just there, and it's not
if it's not overt, like
right.
Sort of like that reference that they did in Endgame. A lot of people complained because it was too small, but the fact that it was small, for me, it was like, it's there,
it's just a thing.
Exactly. Sort of like
Kings of the Wild.
Exactly. Kings of the Wild was another example that Stevie and I both have referred to. The character, it just so happens that this is who he is. He's gay.
Yeah.
It's not a big ass deal.
Exactly.
Right.
And so like I did that same thing with one of the characters in my Silent Champions, because I love the way that Nick Eames did it in Kings of the Wild. The character that I wrote sort of inspired by Moog, turns out that he runs into his former lover in book 2. And it's never a thing like, oh my God, he's gay, or it's just
which character?
The Secret Keeper.
Okay.
The alchemist explosives expert.
Well, he's my favorite.
He's awesome, and it's never a thing that it's just there. It's just he meets the guy, and the confrontation is about who they are. The Secret Keepers, all the secrets that they have to keep, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's it. The characters, that's the source of conflict, that they're trying to kill each other, not who they are.
Right.
And so doing something like that with a character like Carol, or even if they have the friend have that representation,
right?
I think for me that would just be a really interesting way to do it. And I'm hoping that's what the writers thought when they kept dropping the word Ace so many times. I mean, it's a great nickname, but is it too convenient?
Right. Yeah, I could totally see that, and I like that. I like that approach to representation as well, because I've talked about this endlessly on my YouTube channel, but I think that it is, if you're writing a story and you're not from if you're not from like a marginalized community or identity like that, I think that you should still include it and have that representation, but not have the story be about that, because then you're sort of like taking somebody else's story and whatnot. And that's why I try to do that in my books. And that's why I appreciate it when I see people do that, and it isn't a big deal when it's just an aspect to that character. And other than that, they're your standard, kick-ass superhero, or just cool fantasy hero, or just awesome protagonist who's just not what you typically see in that role. But that's not what the story's about. And I like that a lot, because then it doesn't feel like you're speaking over other people, I guess is a good way to put it, or trying to speak from, I mean, for one thing, you're speaking from a thing that you probably don't know anything about if you're not that, so I do like that approach to representation and storytelling quite a lot.
And it, again, the idea is, without being political about it, when you make a stand about something, when it's a big deal, all of a sudden it's a big deal, essentially.
Right.
You are waving some kind of flag in someone else's face. And I hear this a lot about a lot of authors, that they're like, oh, I bought this book because like one guy was talking to me about military. He's like, oh, it had a tank on it, so I'm always going to buy anything with the tank on it. And then in book 3, he starts feeding me, the author starts feeding me this thing, and he was a conservative, and the author starts feeding me this liberal agenda. And by the time I got to book 4, I was done, because he kept kind of cramming it down my.
And which book was it?
I don't know. He didn't say the name.
Right.
It wasn't mine, because I don't have tanks on mine.
You do have to be careful, though, because there will be people who say that even
Absolutely.
if you're not, you know what I mean? Like, even if you're not, because I get that a lot, where I'll have a romance that's been going on since book 1, and it's I don't write explicit or active romance. What's the term for it these days? People don't have sex on the page in my books.
That's called active romance.
Active romance. That's what
Wow.
I heard somebody call it on a page on a podcast a couple of years ago, and it tickled me so much that I've always remembered it. But yeah, so there's no active romance. There's no on the page describing what's going on in my books, but there is a relationship where two characters are clearly being intimate with each other, and it fades to black every time. Closed door active romance sections. And then all of a sudden, later in the story or later in the series, a relationship starts up between two people of the same gender. And then the person comes to my Facebook feed on that series and is like, hey, listen, people can do whatever they want, but like, I don't want to read about it in my books. And I'm like, listen, you've read less about that than you read about the thing. So clearly your thing is not that there is sexual content at all. It's just these two characters in particular.
I wonder, sorry to interrupt. I wonder if it's like starting something in the book offends them or irritates them more than it being a pre-existing thing. Sort of like the character Moog from Kings of the Wild. It's his past. He's been this way for his whole life. So it's like, it is what it is. His relationship with his husband is clearly established. So readers, they can't be like, wait a minute, I don't like where this is going, because it has been going that way for so long. Whereas when it's something new that springs up, then maybe they have a little bit more freedom or license to feel, okay, this is something new and I don't like it. I mean, because that's if that were the case, it's the opposite in this story that I've gotten this on. The straight relationship starts at the beginning of the first book, and the gay relationship is a pre-existing thing that's existed years before the main character meets these other characters. Gotcha.
Like, I've had lots of conversations about this with people online, and you can just kind of tell when somebody's like, and honestly, most of the criticism that I value the most about those relationships actually comes from people in the queer community. And they're like, hey, the way you wrote this, let me just give you some feedback on it. And they tell me, this. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. And then there's the people who come in who are like, why are you pushing all this stuff down? And it's like, okay, all right, buddy. Like we get it,
What advice did they give you? Do you remember?
There's been a lot over the years, and I've talked often about how I want people to be very honest in their feedback, because and like a little bit more brutal than they would normally be, because I have sort of a brain that takes lukewarm feedback very lukewarmly. And so if somebody's like, I wasn't the biggest fan of this, then I'll be like, oh, well, I mean, they weren't the biggest fan of it. But in one book, I sent it out to beta readers, and they had so many things that they weren't the biggest fan of. And I just wrote them back and I said, can you just be like a little more forthright with me? Is there something you really don't like about this book? And then they wrote back and they said, okay, listen, if I'm being honest, you destroyed this character. She was my favorite character. And you messed up this and this and this. And when they put it that way, I was like, oh Christ, you're right. Like, I didn't get that when they were just being like, this could be adjusted. So in terms of that, I've gotten feedback from people I'd written a few books in my Underrealm series, and one reader said, hey Garrett, you know how I can tell you're white? And I was like, oh no, what? Why? And they said, you only describe someone's skin color when they aren't. And I was like,
whoa.
Right? And that's something you would never think about unless somebody is just like, hey, look at the example in your book.
Dang,
and
I
so
think I am
I'm gonna say
right.
I'm gonna say that the only time that's not necessarily true is when the main character is black, or like for example in my Heirs of Destiny young adult series, one's Egyptian, one's Turkish, one's sort of Central African, and then one is hardcore white.
Okay.
And the only time that they notice the color is when it's different from their own.
Right.
Essentially. Or similar to their own.
No, but this is what this person was saying was there's all these characters, and if they were white, I didn't say what color their skin was, and then if they weren't white, then I described their skin color, and that's a galaxy brain moment, that was like, of course, like, because we have these things that we grow up with where we think certain things are the default. Another one, somebody was commenting to me. I had a very cool but sort of side character in my first series who was trans. Sorry about my dog. Who was trans, and then another. Should I pause that? How loud is that in your guys'?
No, it's fine.
It's not.
That's fine. Bad. Okay, cool. So, and then I had a few trans readers write me and basically be like, "Hey, she's really, really cool. There's one thing that this wasn't even like a criticism at this point, but there's one thing that you might want to consider, which is that like she's like fully and completely transitioned and is very what's called like passing, where like if you didn't know she was trans, you wouldn't know it at all, and that's fine, but that's not the case for a lot of trans people. Like some people just don't feel the need to progress that far or can't for whatever reason, but they're still very valid. So in my next new series, I introduced a trans character who just felt very comfortable the way that she was, which was very large and not having transitioned her body in a very strong way, right? And it wasn't made a big deal of, just like we were talking about before, sexuality, race, gender. It's never made a big deal of in the story because that's not what the story's about. But she's just there, and there's her description of her, and she's basically the easiest way to express this character is if Hagrid was trans. She's gigantic. Wow. She's huge, big, shaggy, massive hair, no beard, obviously, because she gets rid of that and whatnot. But like if Hagrid was trans and like didn't do all that much to transition, but just was. So I write this character and I got some very strong feedback because I had been a total dumbass and not realized that a lot of people were going to read this second series without ever having read the first one. And this sounded like my interpretation of what all trans women looked like. You get what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
I'm just, trans women are huge and have huge hands and are so hairy and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh God. And that was my bad. That was totally my bad. And I got some very strong feedback about that. And I went on basically all my social media platforms and just did, hey, mea culpa, and here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And the first and easiest thing that I did was that I stuck an author's note at the beginning of that book explaining, hey, you're going to meet this character. She looks this certain way. The reason is all of the context. And if you want to see a wider, like, diverse array of trans people. They're in this book and this book and this book and all these other places in the series, just so you know. Like, that's an easy fix. And then there's more work to do in terms of like developing my own outlook and sensitivity reading and all that sort of stuff for the future. But like, that's the sort of feedback that you have to realize, that it doesn't mean you're a crappy person. It just means that you don't think with these things the same way that somebody who's lived that life does.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, and that's why it's really important to solicit advice and feedback and all that sort of stuff, and not get too defensive when it comes your way. You know what I mean?
Oh,
because even when you're not trying to make a statement or be super political about it, no work exists in a vacuum. It exists in a real world, right?
Yeah. People are they're gonna read into it and expect that you are making a statement.
Exactly.
So that's why it's got to be done right. Like, I mean, just as an example, I'm 6.5 feet tall. My thief character is 5'3" at best. And so I'm used to walking into the room and immediately sort of being in charge because I'm looking down at everybody, literally. This character is not, you know, so the way that she approached every single conversation, I mean, the fact that she looks up instead of looking down, that took a lot to wrap my head around, you know. This was back when I was sort of a newer writer, so I hadn't had experience, you know, getting into character as much. But it was just like I actually had to talk to my wife, who's 5'3.25". I think she's nearby, so I got to make sure to specify that. And then her younger sister, who's like, I don't know, barely 5 foot or something, just to sort of to understand what it's like to be short,
right?
In especially when dealing with someone like me, when there are characters like my size and, you know, and build that she is basically ordering them around,
right?
And how you know, they would assert themselves, how they would, you know, move, how they'd stand, what they would do to, you know, to look bigger or to act bigger, just things like that I, as a big person, would never think about. And so doing that sort of, it made it real for a small person to go that way, and then it makes the character much more real. And, you know, obviously short isn't as big of a representation as it would be. I'm going to do dwarfism, though. That's a fun one that I'm going to tackle. Not like fantasy dwarves, but like real dwarfism.
Yeah, and that's a funny point, is that if you talk about researching that or wanting to sort of get more information about what it's like to live that way, or even silly stuff like researching how guns work, researching military terminology and what is boot camp like and all that sort of stuff, nobody sees it as weird, interesting, or pushing an agenda. But like we said before, if you research stuff about queer representation or racial representation, people automatically assume that there's that political agenda to it. And it's like, no, man, that's just life. Like, if you don't think that's just like the existence of some people in the world, you know, like, there's probably more queer people on the planet than there are military people on the planet. Probably, that, you know, just at a guess.
China's military is pretty big.
Oh, they do have a lot, don't they? That's a good point. Okay, but it's probably comparable.
Yeah, there we go.
And, you know, and research for one is just like good, solid work, and research for the other one is like, you know, liberalism run rampant. It's a very funny world, and I think that you just have to, if you're a consumer, a reader, or whatever, or a creator, you just kind of have to acknowledge that, because it's probably not something that you as an individual can change. Right? It's easy to complain about. It's easy to whatever, but I think it's far simpler and better to just like live with it. Just like live with the fact that these things exist, and is the story good or not? That's what really matters in the end. Yeah. Are you making people feel a certain way? Are you making people excited, happy? Or if you're writing horror, are you freaking people the hell out? Like, that's what really counts in the end.
Yeah, and we were talking about suspending disbelief earlier, and the one thing that always gets me to suspend disbelief pretty much immediately is a character I can relate to. You know, someone grounded. I was thinking about, you know, like you were talking about horror. You have a harder time accepting the suspense of disbelief for horror. So you know, a movie like Get Out. Yeah, they start off by introducing this really normal couple. You know, it's a black man, a white woman. Yeah, but absolutely normal. It's a normal scenario right up until it's not. So by the time you have to suspend disbelief, you are already there. You're already connected to what's going on. So then it's like, okay,
Totally.
it's easier to do. And
Yeah.
so that's the same thing when it comes to things like this. Like if you ground the reader in a character, someone who is absolutely real in every way, they have the same hopes, dreams, thoughts, desires, feelings, all of that.
The
They
whole
go
deal.
through the same emotional roller coaster that you do.
Yeah.
And then it just so happens that his or her or their orientation, their religion, their race, their gender, whatever it is
Yeah.
different. It's not as hard.
Doesn't matter.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons that people have a problem with it is that they're not grounded into the character, or authors give them a new character or a character that's not fully, anchored to them, connected to them on an emotional or intellectual level. And then they're like, wait a minute, I don't like this. Whereas if it's a character, like let's say if it just so happened that Katniss Everdeen or Harry Potter, you're following along with these characters the entire time. You love them. You want them to succeed. You feel their pain. You cry their tears. And then it happens that, Harry Potter's black.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case. It's a lot easier to swallow than, here's a new character and here's something else new that maybe you're not familiar with.
I mean, have you read fan fiction? Because there are far more words written that say Harry Potter is gay than there are words written that say that he's straight. I mean, he and Draco are the stars of more fan fiction than probably any other couple in the entirety of all of fan fiction. It's
so they have that. They just finally let out their anger on each other, huh?
Oh yeah, no, it's not exactly my deal, but when you like go looking for Harry Potter fan fiction, because there's some amazing Harry Potter fan fiction out there. It's really, really good. But like searching through that tag, it's like you see some titles and some descriptions that you're like, well, I'll never forget that.
Now I have to go read that. Andy, I feel like we're running out of time.
We are.
Did you want to do the reading?
You know what? Let's do the reading. Garrett, seeing as you are literally the expert at this, tell us what to do. Who reads what?
Okay. Well, so what's the normal format? Am I in on this? Am I reading?
You either do the narrator or you do a character. You can pretty much do whatever the hell you want and make us do whatever the hell you want.
Okay, fantastic.
Don't take too many liberties with that.
I get to it.
I like the idea of I need to get to it too. By the way, my apologies for earlier. We've been moving all week, and I thought that I had set everything up perfectly for today, and then it turned out rather rapidly that I had not. That's why there's all the boxes in the background.
That's totally fine. Stevie's in a hotel hallway somewhere.
Yes, I am.
Nice.
Is this Bloodlust?
Yes, that's the one. Okay, where is that link? Here we go. All right, so the two main characters that I remember from the excerpt that I sent you are Mag and Alburn.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't... Oh, man, I'm not sure. I mean... it's mostly narration. So are one of you like particularly? I'm totally willing to narrate. And
why don't you narrate? I'll read Mag. Stevie, you can read Albert. There we go.
Okay.
Fantastic.
How's Albert? Who's Albert?
Alburn he's a ranger, and he in the audiobooks he's got a big old Texas drawl, but
I can do that.
And then Mag is basically the greatest warrior of her generation, and she knows it. That's pretty much the one line of her personality is kicks ass and is not afraid to admit the fact.
Sounds perfect.
Okay. All right. And this is first person perspective, but I'll just do a narrator voice, and you can do whenever quote unquote I talk, it's actually Alburn.
All right,
here we go.
Okay.
A few moments later, we heard a scraping sound, and then the vampire emerged into the night. It walked on two legs like a man, but it was grotesquely hunched, bent almost double so that its hands nearly scraped the ground. If it had straightened, I know it would have stood at least 3 heads taller than me. Its skin was mottled, pocked, and pallid. It reminded me of the skin of those who have been badly burned and then healed, covered with a mass of scar tissue. Its hands and feet ended in curved claws, each as long as a human hand, and it clicked and clacked them against each other as it moved. Its eyes were black, black as a wizard's who had eaten mage stones, and its pointed ears, which jutted backwards, flitted and twitched, straining to hear any sound. But once I saw its mouth, I forgot every other detail. It was round and wide, almost a circle, and the teeth were bared in a constant grimace. Those teeth were long and pointed and sharp, and stained so badly that in the moon's light they looked to be covered with fresh blood. All this I took in with a moment's glance, and I felt my limbs seize with fear. My right hand, holding the arrow, was slack, and my bow arm lowered towards the ground. Oku gave a tiny whimper and slunk back behind my legs. But Mag, of course, felt no fear at all, or if she did, she hid it perfectly. Without hesitation, she took one step towards the creature, taking no care to soften her footfalls. The vampire, which had seemed to be snuffling at the ground, snapped its head up towards her. It bared sharp teeth and let out a long, hateful hiss.
"Sky above, you're ugly,"
said Mag.
"Come, let me wipe that hideous grimace from your face."
If the creature understood her, it gave no sign, but it did begin to slink towards her. I wondered for a moment why it moved with such caution. It knew something of humans, clearly, and had already killed many of them. Why would it not think that Mag could be hunted as easily as anyone else? Mayhap it was uncertain because Mag was so brazen in her defiance, because she did not show the slightest hesitation or dread. And then I recalled that I was not just a spectator, and that I had remained inactive for too long. The vampire was a few scant paces away from Mag now, and soon I would lose my shot. The arrow was already knocked. I lifted my bow, drew, and fired straight towards the creature's heart. It moved. When people of other kingdoms see the archers of Calenton, they are astounded at our skill. Most who met me thought my bowcraft was something of legend, that I must surely be the greatest bowman who ever lived in the 9 kingdoms. Indeed, I am a skilled archer even by Calenton standards, or I was in those days when I had both arms. And yet, for all my ability, I have met many masters who far surpassed me at the height of my skill. I was trained by a woman who could fire arrows faster than heartbeats, faster than blinking, and send them all with enough strength to pierce chainmail. If an enemy shot at her, she could shoot their darts from the air with her own. I know because I saw her do it. Her eyes were unerring and sharper than an eagle's, and her limbs were a blur. And yet the vampire moved faster than her. It saw the arrow from the corner of its eye, turned, darted aside, and snatched the arrow from midair before I realized what was happening. Then it flipped the dart around and threw it back at me, not with the strength of a bow, but still fast enough to pierce skin. I was saved more by luck than reflexes. I tried to duck almost too late and slipped on a patch of loose leaves. I struck the ground hard, the wind driven out of my lungs.
Sky saved me.
I thought.
How was it so fast?
I heard an inhuman screech and looked up just in time to see it charge me. All 4 limbs ripped and tore at the earth to propel it forward, sending clods of dirt in all directions. But fast as it was, Mag was able to catch it. She ran and leaped in between me and the vampire, and it skidded to a halt before her. But hardly had it paused before it struck with one clawed limb. Mag blocked the swipe, and I heard the deep rending of claws on wood. She stabbed in retaliation, but the vampire spun out of the way. It tried to turn the movement into another attack, but Mag's shield was there again to stop it. It was not until that moment that I realized something about Mag. I had only ever seen her fight another human or animal. When she did so, it was a slaughter. I had never seen her face another opponent who had stood a chance. But now, facing a foe that was so much stronger than a human could ever hope to be, Mag's skill was displayed in full. My eyes, sharp as they were, could not follow the speed of her swings and thrusts. My mind could not comprehend how she knew where the vampire would strike next, nor how she could twist in just such a way to avoid it, place her shield in just the right position to block its swiping claws. Once or twice the vampire struck her mail instead of the shield, and I winced. But after the first time, I realized that even that was part of Mag's plan. She only let it strike her when the blow would glance from her armor, and when it gave her the opportunity to attack with her spear. Her armor was part of her, just like her shield and spear, and she fought now with her whole body instead of only her weapons. Unfortunately for me, the vampire still outmatched her in strength. That meant she had to be more nimble than it was. And after a few heartbeats of frantic battle, that meant she had to leap out of the way of a swipe, landing on the vampire's other side. It turned on me in an instant and pounced. I shrieked, and not a noble battle cry either, and barely managed to leap to my left as its slashing claws sailed past. But now it had me backed up against the steep slope with nowhere to run.
Man,
From
that
the
was awesome. We got to stop it there.
Yeah, okay,
It was
cool.
I
wasn't sure about the
point.
time. I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Here's a good stopping point because he's got nowhere to run. And when that happens, we always want to know what happens next.
Yep.
I
gotta say,
it ends quite well. I'm proud of that scene.
You have a very high
cool.
skill of
Very
writing
cool.
battle
Well,
scenes.
Stevie's, I don't know what's going on with Stevie.
What? Can you
I
not
think you
hear
might have
me?
muted yourself.
Hello? Testing?
Nope.
Testing?
Oh,
Nothing?
here we go. Now talk.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hey.
That was weird. What happened?
I don't know. But
Okay.
anyways, Garrett, why don't you tell our readers, listeners, viewers, surfers where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find my work at underrealm.net, the word under, the word realm.net. All the books are there. And you can find me at my YouTube channel, Garrett Robinson. And I also have a podcast where you can hear the audiobook of my biggest series, The Nightblade Epic. I'm just releasing it a chapter or two per week, and it is the Nightblade Epic podcast. You can find it on iTunes, everywhere else that you can find podcasts.
That is
Are
awesome.
Are you doing the podcast or the audiobook yourself?
I am, yes.
Cool. Yeah, you have the voice for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually in another lifetime. I was a voice talent in LA for like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're reading the narration. I was like, this is unnaturally good. That should not be the case.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Very cool. All right, well, Stevie, sign us out.
All right, guys. Well, we thank you so much for being part of the Fantasy Fiends podcast. I have dropped the link for our new Discord in YouTube. I hope it went through, but I also posted it on our Facebook the Fantasy Fiends podcast page. So go and check that out. Andy, download Discord. I don't know if you know
I do.
what that
I
is.
have Discord on my phone, and I do not open it.
Okay, cool.
Because I can't
Just kidding.
I can't keep up with those random group chats.
I got you. Well, I will be there, and I will talk to you people. And that is it. Thank you so much, Garrett, for being part of the show with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to hop right in that Discord server. I love Discord, man.
Yeah, man. It's on our Fantasy Feeds podcast page. So
Fantastic.
awesome. Well, that is it. Someone's trying to call me. So that is it for the Fantasy Feeds podcast. We love y'all, and we hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Good night.